This is the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
They call me crazy cause I'm facing all my giants. They try to scare me into thinking I can fight it. They tell me I should never even think of trying. But that's just me, I'm gonna live out in defiance.
Welcome, Alphas. Thank you for joining us. We have a fun show for you today. Our guest is retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Oakland McCulloch, a speaker and author of Your Leadership Legacy, Becoming the Leader You Were Meant to Be. We're going to talk with him about servant leadership.
Hey, Joe, before we do, I want to share with you a little bit of history. Because on this day in 1942, President Roosevelt signed a bill creating Women's Auxiliary Agency in the Navy. You were Navy, so this
Go
might make
Navy.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
Go Navy or not, maybe Air Force. But anyway, women accepted for volunteer emergency service. How they came up with that nonsense, I have no idea, but they called it WAVES for short, which is much more catchy. I wonder if they created that nomenclature specifically so they could call it WAVES because it's so catchy.
And I just want to say not all acronyms are created equal.
No, they are not, but WAVES, I
like waves. Yeah.
Get behind.
Ladies making waves.
Women accepted for volunteer emergency service. They're like, no other way will the Navy ever accept women's volunteer service unless it's an emergency. So let's go with women accepted for volunteer emergency service. Let's call them WAVES for sure.
I'm here for it.
Yeah. So the Navy sought to fill the critical positions with women, just as they did during World War I. However, Congress and the U.S. Navy leaders disagreed on whether the women should be in the Navy Reserves or as part of an auxiliary. So on July 30th, 1942, the president signed Public Law 689 establishing the Women's Reserve, a branch of the U.S. Navy Reserves. And then the WAVES filled billets of 900 locations onshore. Public Law 689 still prohibited them from serving on ships or in overseas assignments because heaven forbid we be on ships.
I was under the impression that women's periods attract bears.
Because there's so many out to sea.
Yeah.
Sharks, if they get in the water, sharks maybe.
Could be dead. Everyone could die, Stacy, and you don't seem to even care.
It's like chum.
Oh,
Though that law was later changed, while 38 ratings were open to women, the majority of WAVES worked in clerical, healthcare, and storekeeping billets because, we do keep house really well. Approximately 14,000 served in yeoman and 13,000 WAVES served as hospital corpsmen. Hey, you were a corpsman, right?
I was a corpsman, but I'm not quite recovered from your comment. So feel free to keep going.
Women also served as code breakers. Now, this is pretty damn cool. Women are brilliant minds. We are more than what our physiological beings are. We are brilliant minds. And finally, somebody recognized that and made them code breakers. For the love of God, this is amazing. For the Office of Naval Operations, Highly Secretive Communications Division in Washington, D.C., you brilliant women, and managed the fleet's post offices. For more than 100,000 women served in the WAVES during World War II. Most were discharged in 1946. Then in 1948, Congress passed the Women's Armed Services Integration Act, thank God, which gave women a permanent place in the regular Navy and the Naval Reserve. Although the Women's Reserve ceased to exist, the acronym WAVES continued to be used for a subsequent 25 years. Now, all you ladies out there, I'm sure there aren't many of you left who served during the WAVES. Thank you so much for your service. And all joking aside, you guys are absolutely fantastic, wonderful women. You really paved the way for women like myself to serve. And happy anniversary for all of you. And for all the women who came afterwards serving in the Navy, happy birthday.
Also, it wasn't on this day in history. It was on this day in herstory.
Oh, well.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
And also, I believe this probably pushed bear spray technology ahead 100 years.
Oh, good. Enough of the jokes.
Okay. All right.
Ladies'
okay, Alphas.
menstruation is
yeah. All right. Okay, Alphas, please stick around. We'll be back with Lieutenant Colonel McCulloch right after the break.
talking about suicide is hard, but the American Legion has joined forces with Columbia University to develop training for those who want to learn more about interacting and responding to veterans who may be in crisis. American Legion Be the One training. In the 90-minute class, you'll learn to understand the types of suicidal ideation and 4 behaviors that indicate imminent risk, how to use the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale to determine at-risk individuals, how to identify risk factors and warning signs, and how to communicate effectively with individuals who may be at risk of hurting themselves. Online and in-person sessions are available. Visit betheone.org/training to find a session. Learn the skills that'll give you the confidence to talk about suicide and be the one to save just one veteran.
Hey, Alphas. Today we are joined by retired Lieutenant Colonel Oakland McCulloch. Welcome to Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Joe and Stacy. I appreciate you guys having me on the show.
What a pleasure, Oak. And welcome to the show. Thank you for your service, first and foremost. And thank you for taking the time for being with us.
Yeah, you know, I just like you guys, I'm sure you get the same thing. People always thank you for your service. And I always say, and absolutely mean it, it was an honor and a privilege to serve the people of this country. So,
You know, I was curious because in preparing for this interview with you, I discovered that you didn't come from a military family, which most military folks do, but you not only attended West Point for a couple of years, then you went to ROTC, but not coming from a military family. What drew you to the Army and then ultimately to a commission?
right. Yeah. So, you know, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I just spent the last 13 years recruiting for Army ROTC here in Florida. And, you know, one of the facts is that 75% of the officers in the Army that go through ROTC or West Point come from military families. So I was certainly one of the few that didn't. You know, I had an uncle that was in the Army in Vietnam, and NCO in Vietnam. And then I had an uncle who was in the Navy during Vietnam. And, you know, I used to hear their stories and whatever when I was a kid. And they probably are the ones that initially got me started to think that way. And then, you know, I didn't come from, you know, some would say I came from a poor family. Certainly we weren't dirt poor, but we didn't have a whole lot of money growing up as a kid. And I got a chance to be an officer in the United States Army, go to West Point, be an officer. And that's kind of, I knew that's what I wanted to do, be a leader I wanted to be a leader and in the military. But what kept me in the Army was I just always told myself, look, I got to do things that nowhere else in the world does somebody who came from where I came from get to do. If I did my service so that your kids or somebody else's kids got the same opportunities that I got growing up to make those same decisions. And so that's why I stayed in the Army. That's why I made it a career. Besides the fact I loved what I did. I mean, you know, I loved being an officer in the Army and leading men and women, and got to do, it allowed me to do some amazing things and go to some amazing places. I've been in 45 countries on 5 continents. Would never have been able to do that if I hadn't been in the Army. I'm just a dumb farm boy. So
I love that you've said the word service like you meant it. And I think a lot of times people, and some people go into the military because they want to be admired,
Sure.
and that's a problem that I think some people grow out of. I mean, I think everyone is going into the military, there's a touch of glory that everybody wants. I mean, if we're being honest, that's the thing when you're 12 that makes you really want to do it. And you don't want to crush that. But you realize that definition changes a little bit when you get in. So during my time in Iraq, I was surrounded by really good leadership for the most part, and that shaped my own philosophy towards leadership. I love that you mentioned that leadership isn't about you, and that ties in with the concept of service. But I recently had an opportunity to go on a sailing trip with a few of the men that I served with all the way back in 2004 in Fallujah, Iraq, two of them being platoon leaders for my unit that started a nonprofit that for the sailing. And it took no time at all to get with these guys again and go from calling them, lieutenant to Eric and Josh. And my first sergeant was Steve, but the respect was still there.
Sure.
And so, here we are. We had a bit of an engine fire on a sailboat, and it's funny because you've got a bunch of combat vets there, and you've got an engine fire in the Atlantic Ocean on a boat full of these combat vets. And there was so much trust and competency there that we collectively probably need to go up 30 heartbeats a minute. It was just, oh, I smell fire. And someone said, I smell burning rubber. Get the fire extinguisher. And somebody went down there and put it out and said, okay, well, now we're sailing all night to get to where we need to go.
Joe, if I could interject there.
Yes.
That was probably all the Marines collectively trying to think.
That might have been what started the fire.
Yeah.
We did have two corpsmen there.
Carry on.
So I didn't, say all that to talk about myself. I talked about that because when you've got good leadership, there's trust, and it inspires that trust. And so I feel like that's what good leadership looks like, is that no matter what happens, you don't focus on the problem. You focus on the fact that I'm going to be a part of the solution, and these guys are going to help orchestrate what that looks like.
Right.
So you've mentioned that leadership isn't about you. And I love that. But my experience shows that good leadership is sometimes put into a situation where you've been set up for failure. As we call it in the low end, Blue Falcon. I'm sure you guys use the same term.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you've been put into a situation where you showed up to a unit that had really poor trust in their leadership, or where you were put in a position to where it looked like success was not going to be a feasible option, at least for a while.
Yeah. I've been put in positions to fix units, organizations, and that's okay.
I would love for you to give me and if you don't mind, I would love for you to share something like that, because from the bottom, a lot of it's pretty low stakes. It's just you get kind of screwed into doing a muck job, or you're burning diesel fuel and feces. But what does that look like from the top? I'd love to hear a story of how you had to deal with that.
Right. So in my opinion, you're right. I absolutely believe leadership is not about you, and it's all about you. It's not about the title you get or the privileges you get, or that you get better pay and all those other things that come with being a leader. And that's okay, as long as that's not the only reason you want to be the leader. If that's why you want to be the leader, please go do something else, because you're not going to be a good one, I promise. It's all about you and how you treat and empower the people that you have the privilege to lead. And it is a privilege to be the leader. And unfortunately, many leaders today in every profession and at every level across this country have forgotten that it is a privilege to lead. So I got lucky. My first platoon, my first job in the Army, I showed up at Fort Stewart, Georgia. And there were 3 lieutenants who showed up that day. And there was only one platoon leader spot. And I got it. For whatever reason, I got selected to be that platoon leader. The brigade commander interviewed us and he selected me. So for whatever reason. And I got lucky. I got a great platoon that hadn't had a platoon leader in over 7 months. So the platoon sergeant was running that platoon. And I'll never forget, Master Sergeant, or at that time, he was Sergeant First Class Pinson. And I showed up at the unit. The company commander, my platoon was already out doing rehearsing for a dismounted live fire exercise. So I showed up at noon. They'd already been practicing all morning. And company commander introduces me to my platoon sergeant. Sergeant Pinson puts his arm around me and says, "Come on, grab an MRE, sir. Let's go have lunch." And we went and sat underneath a tree. And we're sitting there having lunch. And he said, "Look, let's just make this real simple. You're the platoon leader now. You're in charge. We'll do things however you want to do them. However," I remember I'm a 24-year-old lieutenant. He said, "I've been in the Army for 23 years. He'd been in the Army almost as long as I'd been alive. He said, "I'm going to tell you when you're messing up. If you still want to do it that way, we'll still do it that way, because you're in charge." He said, "But it's my job to tell you when you're about to make a mistake." And so I listened to the man. And then we had our lunch and said a few other things, had our lunch. And I said, okay, let's go do this exercise. And he said, will you just stand by and watch? I said, no. I said, my job's to lead the assault across the objective. We'll do one rehearsal. I'll do it. He said, but you don't know anybody here. I said, I just got done talking to you, and everything you said, I know I trust you. And it's all about people and trust. That's what leadership is about. So fast forward about 13 months, another platoon leader came in about 6 months after me. The platoon was horrendous, absolutely horrendous. What couldn't accomplish anything. They would tell you how bad this leader was. When they'd go out on an exercise, we use Miles equipment, laser equipment. As soon as he'd cross the LD, his own guys would kill him with Miles. He'd cross the LD and he'd say, I'm dead. And we all knew what happened. His own guys killed him. So my company commander one day was complaining about this guy to me. And I said, look, there's nothing wrong with that. He wasn't complaining about the guy, he was complaining about the platoon. I said, look, there is nothing wrong with that platoon. I said, there's something wrong with the leader. I said, if you put me in charge of that platoon, I promise you in 6 months, I'll have it operating as well as mine does, that I'm operating right now. And he said, sold. And I said, oh man, what did I just ask for? and so he put me in charge of this platoon, and 6 months later, it was scoring great scores on gunnery. It was accomplishing things it was supposed to do. And the way I started was, I started by building that trust and confidence with the guys, that I knew what I was doing and that I cared about them. And so the first things I did was very simple. And when we accomplished those very simple things, I made a big deal out of it. And then I upped the scale just a little bit. And as we accomplished that, I upped the scale just a little bit. And I kept going until they were meeting the same standards that I expected from my initial platoon.
You know, that's, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to ask, like, what does that look like? So when you came on board after relieving the other platoon leader, did you engage those troops and ask them what was going wrong, or did you kind of sit back and assess and view it, or how did that work?
Yeah, so I mean, I had some assessment just from being in the same company, watching what they did and how they did it, and I just realized that they just didn't. Nobody was holding them to a standard. They weren't trained to a standard. They weren't held to a standard. So they did whatever they wanted to do. And so when I walked in that first day, I said, look, I said, I'm not going to change things right away. I said, you know, I want to get a feel for you guys. I want to get to know you guys. And I think that's one of the problems that leaders are afraid of today. And even in my time back when I was a lieutenant, you know, you got to get to know the people that you have the privilege to lead, because nobody's going to trust you if they don't know you and you don't know them. That's just part of the trust piece, is they got to know who you are. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and I laid out very, very quickly within a week or two. I said, okay, here are the standards we are going to meet. No argument, no doubt about it. We're going to meet these standards, and this is how we're going to do it. And I walked them through how we plan to do that and what their part of that was. Because let's face it, if I don't care what kind of goals or objectives or vision you have for your organization as a leader, if you think you're the one that's going to get them there, you are sadly mistaken. It's the people that work for you that are going to get you there. And if they don't know their part in it, if they don't know where you want to go and they don't know their part of how to get you there, that they have to do to get you there, then how are they going to do it? So I made it very clear what the vision was, what we had to accomplish, and what their part of that was. And then we went about training them to standard, making sure that they could do what I asked them to do. And that's the way I went about it.
I like that you were willing to get involved initially, because I think that sort of mimics what I had to deal with as a corpsman with Marines. You know, I show up, I'm the Navy guy, and you know, I'm a big old corn-fed boy, but I showed up, and when they started, I didn't know how to integrate myself in with them.
Right.
But it turns out Marines are very simple. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean
No.
that as in the very best part about the military is clear expectations and simplicity. When things run simple, they run smooth.
That's right.
And just filling sandbags. That's what it took. That's just getting in there and getting in the pit and digging holes and moving sandbags was enough for me. Exactly. And I integrated in. So I love that you were willing to get out there and lead with, not in front, not above, but with.
Yeah. Well, you know, one of the things that I emphasize in both in my book and in my leadership talk, and I even have a little card that has 10 tips for leaders. And the number one tip is get out of your office and spend time with the people that you have the privilege to lead. And because again, nobody's going to trust you if they don't know you, and they're not going to get to know you if you're sitting in your office all day. Now I got it. Leaders have to be, there's office time for leaders. I got it.
And air conditioning is so nice.
Yeah, but every opportunity you get, you need to get out of your office and spend time with the people that you have the privilege to lead. That, and you know, one of the pieces of advice, I've had my hand in commissioning over 600 lieutenants for the Army over the last 16 years. And one of the pieces of advice I gave every single one of them is that every day, your goal every day should be to go out and find one person in your organization, just one, and find out something new about that person. Not about what they do at work, their personal life. What's their spouse's name? What's their kid's name? What sports do their kids play? What's their hobbies? What do they like, don't like? One thing every day, one person. And you'll see the trust just start to explode.
Wow.
Thank you.
I think taking that concept of trust in leadership and applying that to, say, the American Legion posts, because we've got more than 12,000 American Legion posts nationwide, and they're all volunteer leaders, or they're made, you know, the leadership is made up of volunteers.
Sure.
And they're all working really, really hard to improve their communities and to support their fellow veterans. And some of them have maybe never served in leadership roles in the military, or maybe in their careers. And so these, you know, some of these folks are maybe first time in these sort of positions. And obviously some of the things that you're saying seem maybe like not to diminish it, but it seems like no-brainers, but can be almost intimidating, especially for people who may be introverts or have never been in a position to be in that leadership role. What kind of tips would you give our alphas who are listening to get out of their comfort zones, to learn about their I don't want to say subordinates, because I don't know if that's really an accurate
the people that they're having the privilege to lead.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think there's a couple things that I would say. Number one, I think you know, one of the things that I always tried to do was I tried to talk to the people in my organization, and I think the people in charge of the American Legions can do this as well. Figure out what they want. What do they want what do they want it to look like? Because I know every American Legion is a little bit different. I mean, just like every organization is a little bit different, as it should be. We don't want robots running things. We want individuals with their own values and beliefs and, you know, all those things that make us human and make us want to be good. I think we want people to use those things. So, you know, get out there and ask the people in your organization that you're running, what do you want this organization to look like? Because, you know, I would think that the person is leading it to help the people in the organization. At least I hope that's the case. And if that's the case, then how do you know if you're helping people if you don't even know what they're looking for, what they want the organization to look like? Now I got it. There's probably guidelines that it's got to stay within this, but that there's probably a lot of wiggle room there that you can make that organization look like whatever you want. So number one, get to know the people and talk to them. And number two, I would say, you know, just figure out what makes, how comfortable you are in making decisions. Involve people in decision making. I'm a huge believer that you involve as many people as you can when you make a decision. When you have the time, I got it. When people are shooting at you, you don't have time to stop and say, okay, what do you think? It's that bad person shooting at me. This is what we're going to do. Go make him stop. I got that. But that's not the case that we're running into now and what we're talking about. So involve as many people as you can in that decision-making process whenever possible. And I think the reason I emphasize that is because then when you come up with a solution or you come up with a decision that you're going to make, it's no longer Colonel McCulloch's idea or solution. It's our solution. We all had a say in it. You know, I may not use your suggestion this time, but I might use it next time. Again, that starts to build trust. At least I asked your opinion. And then they got skin in the game. Now it's part of they got a reason to make that successful because they had some say in what we were going to do. So I think those two things, ask people what they want it to look like, and then involve them in whatever decisions, big decisions you have to make so that they have some input in what it looks like.
Yeah, I think so. I once heard you say that good leaders will develop leaders. And one of my mentors once said that if you have one of the best ways to get a solution is to make your problem someone else's problem. And I guess it's just another roundabout way of saying let other people help develop solutions.
Absolutely. You know, if you don't do that, then you're only using your knowledge, your skills, your abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just here to tell you, I don't care how long you've been doing what you're doing, you don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
If you involve everybody else, then you get to use their skills, their knowledge, their abilities. And that's what allows creativity to happen. You know, I had a boss who retired, a 3-star general who happened to be a mentor of mine. Not sure why, but he took an interest in me and was a mentor of mine. And he told me one day, he said, Oak, leadership is on a scale. He said, on this end of the scale, you have that authoritarian micromanaging, do it exactly as I tell you to do it, guy or gal. And we've all worked for that person and we hated it. That's horrible. That stifles all creativity. Then on this end of the scale, you have Attila the Hun and chaos. Controlled chaos, but chaos. He said, and you want to be as far down that road to chaos as you feel comfortable. He said, because that's where creativity happens. That's where you're using those other people's skills, other people's abilities, other people's knowledge. And, you know, and the way you get there is very simple. Well, the concept is simple. Doing it takes a little bit. You create a culture so you know that they're going to do the things you ask them to do. They're going to do the right thing. You train them to a standard so you know they can do what you ask them to do. You give them a very clear vision of what you want it to be, commander's intent that we used to use in the Army, vision. You give them the resources they need, time, money, people, equipment, whatever, and then you get out of their way and you let them do it. And, you know, the analogy I always use is if I got to get to the number 9, how do I care how you get there? 7 plus 2 is 9, but so is 6 plus 3 and 5 plus 4 and 8 plus 1. I don't care how you get me to 9. I just need you to get me to 9. Get out of their way, let them do it, and you'll be absolutely shocked at what the people that you have the privilege to lead will come up with.
Yeah. On my side of things, though, I feel like some people lack the confidence to dilute their leadership through other people's opinions. Yep. They want that, and those aren't people that should be leaders. That's kind of I like the idea that chaos, because it kind of reminds me of a happy home. You can have a strict and happy home, but there's something fun in the chaos. There's something fun in
it's the creativity.
Yes.
And that's what it is. And you know, you hit it right on the head, Joe. Leaders who are afraid to give away the authority, because that's what you have to do. You have to give away authority to make all that stuff happen. They can't put their ego aside. And we want people with an ego, and we all have an ego. Anybody who tells you they don't have an ego is lying to you, okay?
Has got 2 of them.
We all have an ego. There you go. We want people to have an ego because that's what drives people to be successful. That's what drives people to be the best at whatever it is they do. So we want people to have an ego, but there are times when you have to realize that you have to put that ego aside because, again, you don't have all the answers, and allow people to come up with those answers that you would have never thought about, or a way to do it that you would have never thought about. So I think that's the problem, is that we don't have we have leaders, many leaders today have too big of an ego and they're not willing to put it aside.
So, you've mentioned mentorship, and having been sort of unofficially mentored, in very short term, sometimes it's just having someone who's gone through what you've gone through to look up to. In your case, it was that first sergeant, and I don't care who you are. You're a 23-year-old guy, whether you've got bars on your shoulder or not. When you see a grizzled first sergeant, you look up to him.
I would hope you do.
And if you don't, you're missing out on a wealth
Absolutely.
of knowledge and experience.
Absolutely.
So,
and I think just to your point, that's what happened to that other lieutenant. Is he thought he was in charge and he was going to do it his way no matter what, and he was making mistakes, and they eventually just gave up on him. Because you're right. I mean, you got to use the experiences out there.
And as far as experiences, I had just gotten hurt. 3-month-old daughter I've never even met. I got to hold her for the first time I was in the hospital. I got an above knee amputation on the left side. My right leg's a mess. The missing one's the good one. I say all that because I had a gentleman by the name of Andrew LaRake, a pilot, come in and sat down in a chair and took off his prosthetic leg and just handed it to me. And he said, "This is weird, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, this is really weird." I'd never held a prosthetic. I was still pretty early on. And he said, "You've got to get over it. This is who you are for the rest of your life." And he said, once you get over it, you'll realize this is also kind of cool. And he's like, "I don't care what kind of pills they got you on. You'll never forget this. It's just too weird." And that little weird interaction that I had with a guy that I barely knew really set me up for success. That little moment of just realizing that whether I like it or not has nothing to do with anything. This is who I am.
That's right.
And so it's given me opportunities to see those moments in others and how impactful they can be, just these moments. And so, and I've said it many times, but you never know when you're having a very important conversation, because you may not feel that way at the time. Sometimes you have a conversation with someone on an airplane, 2 days later, you can't stop thinking about it. And it didn't seem like anything at the time.
Yeah.
Or it may be one-sided, which is it makes you feel guilty when you have what feels to you a very common conversation. And this person comes up to you a year later and is like, "You changed everything right there," that conversation. And so, is there a particular individual that you've mentored whose growth and success stands out to you, whether it was because it was a surprise? Because sometimes you forget that you have an impact on people. You're not on because you just, I don't know, lack of confidence, but it's like, it seems dangerous to sit in the arrogance of thinking that everything that you say to people is going to be absorbed and
not everything is going to be. You're absolutely right. But I made a point. I said I've had my hand in commissioning over 600 lieutenants. I made a point to them to say, look, you are going to make a difference in somebody's life every day. As a leader, every day you will make a difference in somebody's life. Make a conscious decision to make a positive difference in their life. In somebody's life every day. But to answer your question, it's funny that you said that. When I wrote my book, it came out, and about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months after it was published, I got a phone call, and the guy introduced himself, and I didn't recognize the name. And he said, "You probably don't remember me." And I said, "No, I'm sorry, I don't." I said, "Fill me in." And he said, "When you were a company commander," I had 2 company commands. One of them was a basic training company command. He said, "When you were a company commander of the basic training company, I was one of the privates in your company." And he said, and I'll never forget this. One day we were out on the range, and it was lunchtime, and the 3 of us privates were sitting up on top of the tank eating an MRE, and you walked up and you grabbed an MRE and you climbed up on the tank and you sat there and talked to us. And one of the things I was talking about was, what's your goals in life? What do you want to do 5 years, 10 years from now? Where do you want to be? And they were all kind of asking questions about being an officer. And I said, look, you can do this. If at the end of your enlistment, if you want to go to college and go through ROTC, become an officer, then by all means do that. And he did. He did his enlistment. He got out, did his ROTC. 20 years later, retired as an officer in the Army, and now owns his own business. And he just wanted to catch up with me and just kind of say that what a difference that, that afternoon made. I didn't get up there with the thought of making a difference in somebody's life. I just got up there because I was wanting to get to know the people I was leading and answer
a little bit hungry.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you never know when you're going to make a huge impact in somebody's life. Sometimes it's that simple.
So when somebody goes from enlisted to officer, it's called a Mustang, correct?
Right.
What happens is it NJP when they go from officer to enlisted?
Yeah, that's called something else. Yeah.
Probably a unicorn.
Joe. It's pretty universal across all branches. You should know about that, right, Joe?
Hey, I stayed out of trouble because I don't drink. That's all it takes in the military to not get in trouble, is just don't drink.
Yeah, that's a good first step. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned writing a book. Can you remind us of the title? Yeah.
So I wrote a book. It's called Your Leadership Legacy: Becoming the Leader You Are Meant to Be. And I get asked quite often because I use that title, Your Leadership Legacy. So they say, so what does that mean? Why is that important to you? And it's very important to me. That's why I titled the book that. And I tell them, I said, look, as a leader, you should want to leave a legacy. And to me, it has two parts to it. Number one, very small part of it is what you actually accomplished in that organization. Now, that does matter. In the real world, results do matter. Maybe in fantasy land, it doesn't, where everybody gets a trophy and everybody's a winner, maybe not. But in the real world, results do matter. So about 20% of your legacy is what you accomplished. The rest of it is the leaders that you helped produce that are going to carry on that legacy, those things that you taught them, the values, the culture, how to act, with integrity and character, and all those things that they're going to carry on throughout their career and pass on to the next generation. And what really hit that to me, I always kind of thought about it that way, but what really brought it to the forefront for me, I was running my ROTC program at the University of South Alabama in Mobile. So I was helping to produce the next generation of leaders. And one day, Master Sergeant David Powell, who worked for me, and I say he worked for me, he was probably a better leader than I was. We were sitting there one day talking about the significance of what we were doing, helping to create that next generation of leaders. And he said, sir, great leadership handed down from generation to generation is what develops great nations. And I thought, wow, what a powerful quote. I wish I could take credit for that quote, but I can't. That started David Powell.
Hey, he's not here.
Yeah, but I still stay in contact with him. A great human being. Then I thought, what is even more powerful than that quote, the way it is that you can take that word nations and you can substitute anything you want for it. Family, hospital, university, food bank, doesn't matter, because every organization in every profession needs good leadership. And that is our job. That's your legacy, is what type of leadership you help produce for that organization.
Yeah. Well, you also said that good leaders and all people should read. So what are you reading right now?
Yeah. I try to read something all the time. I'm not reading a book right now. So okay. The last book I reread John Wooden on leadership. that's one of my favorite leadership books. I think every leader should read it. And I think one of the reasons, and if you've never seen John Wooden's Pyramid of Success, you got to see it. I mean, that hung in my office for many, many years. It's unbelievable. And he hit it right on the head. But one of the reasons I really like John Wooden is because he believed in servant leadership. And he understood that it wasn't about creating championship basketball teams. He did that, I think 6 or 7 of them in a row, national championship. But that wasn't what drove him. It was creating good young men who were going to be good fathers and good husbands and good citizens. And he realized that that was his job. And I believe that's our job as leaders, is to create better people. But if I'm not reading a book, and I'm not right now, just because I'm writing my second book and
Ooh, that's intriguing. Okay.
But I try to read some, I start my day and I end my day the exact same way every single day. I don't care where I am. I don't care what I'm doing. I start and end my day the exact same way. I have control over those 2 things. I don't have control over a lot of what happens in the middle, but I know I have control over those 2 things. So I start my day every day. I do the daily mass. I read a couple chapters in the Bible, and then I do my daily prayers. And then I end my day every day I write in my journal. I'm a huge believer in journals. I write in my journal. I read something, even if it's an article or a blog or something. I read something that evening. And then the last thing I do every single night before I go to bed is I reflect. I reflect on, what did I do today? What was I supposed to do? What did I do? And how can I get better at it? Because, I had somebody one day tell me, I learned from experience. I said, no, you don't. You don't learn anything from experience. Experience is full of emotions. You learn from the reflection on that experience. That's how we learn things, not from the experience.
Wow.
I think that's incredible, because I think that one of the things that I try to do with any type of criticism is pause, is immediately take a moment. And it doesn't matter how harsh that criticism is. I need to know when I disagree with them that I have given it consideration.
That's right, because it may be warranted.
Yeah.
And that's what I tell people all the time. I said, look, every time somebody disagrees with you or has criticism of you, then you need to stop and say, okay, was this warranted?
Yeah.
Or was it just somebody who was jealous or whatever? And then you can make a decision on what you want to do with it. Either try to fix yourself or say, okay, that doesn't really matter. But you can't do that if you don't, exactly like you said, you got to pause and stop and think about it. Take the emotion out of it and think about it in a rational way. Did I deserve this criticism? And if so, how do I fix it?
Well, as the last thing I'd love to do, if you got just a moment real quick, is the hardest part, I think, of transitioning into civilian life is taking the things that you've learned and moving them into a civilian life. The thing is so many of what we learn, and especially as we develop as civilians with this military past, is how to market ourselves.
Yeah.
And not using this is my identity as a wounded veteran, but there are perks to everything. And having a metal leg means that when I get up in front of people and I'm, 6'3", 230 pounds of man meat and metal over here, like, I have people's attention from the get-go. And if I can capitalize on that in that moment, I'm being flippant there. Like I'm kind of joking. I kind of pick on myself a little bit, but
that's true.
How do you take some of these things and market yourself in a way? I don't know how to tell someone my time is worth this. Right. I'll drive to Nebraska and talk somewhere, and they'll be like, how much do we need to pay you? And I'll be like, how much was gas in the room? Like, and that doesn't make any sense. I don't know how to tell people. It feels weird for me to say this is what I'm worth. Right.
And I struggled with that when I started out on the speaking circuit. And, my philosophy has always been, and I take criticism from it from other speakers, but my philosophy is I never want what I'm charging to come speak to keep you from having me come speak. Because to me, it's the message. I want to get my message out. And you know, and luckily I have a wife, you know, 37 years. Why she married me, I have no idea. And I certainly don't know why she stuck with me for 37 years. But now she doesn't have time to train anybody else, so she stuck with me. Sorry. Luckily, I have a wife who supports me. And she said, look, Oak, I don't care if you don't make a penny doing what you're doing. You just can't lose money. I said, I got that. Okay. That's a pretty simple equation. I can figure that one out. Even for a dumb farm boy, I can figure that one out. So I have a set price that I say, okay, this is what I charge. And then if somebody says, well, we can't afford that, I said, what can you afford? And then I figure it out from there. And if I can do it for that price, I'll do it for that price. Because again, to me, it's all about my message. I want to get my message out. I'm not worried about making $1 million here. That's not where I'm at in my life. And I don't, never been there in my life, but I'm certainly not there now. It's all about getting my message out. And the way, and I look at it, I have 4 ways to get my message out. I got my book. I've got my keynote talk. I've got my social media, so I can write articles and blogs and make comments on other people's posts. And then I've got podcasts, and I've been on now, I think this is my 188th podcast that I've been on in 19 different countries. So, I mean, I just try to use all of them as much as possible to get my message out. But, you know, to kind of answer part of your question, how do you, I believe that leadership is leadership. Doesn't matter where you learned it, doesn't matter where you practiced it. The principles of leadership are always the same. They haven't changed in thousands of years, and they're not going to change in thousands of years. Anybody who walks up to me and says, I figured out something new about leadership, I'm like, get away from me. Because it doesn't, the principles don't change. How you apply those principles in the civilian world versus the military, or versus first responder, or whatever profession you are, that may change. How you communicate, how you enforce things might change, but the principles don't change. So I always tell veterans, look, all those things you learned in the military are great tools that are going to help you in the civilian world. You just got to learn how to adapt them into the civilian world. But the principles that you learn, the things you learned, will hold you very well in the civilian world.
Thank you. Rock.
Well, we are wrapping it up, and we've taken up so much of your time, and it has been such a treat today. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to share?
No, I think we hit a lot of good things. You know, obviously can't talk about everything in 30 minutes.
I wish. Oh my gosh, I really
yeah. And I'm always happy to come back if someday you want me to come back. I mean, absolutely.
We will take you up on that when that second book drops.
We can dive into some other things. But you know, I think the thing that I always like to emphasize is that leadership is about people and trust. Yeah. And if you understand that, you can lead just about any organization. Look, I don't know anything about a hospital. I try to stay away from hospitals. There's mean people in there trying to do mean things to me. Okay?
Stab you and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I don't want any part of that. But if you put me in charge of a hospital tomorrow, I promise you I can run it, because I know how to lead people. I'll find the people who can help me figure out what I need, what I don't know, and I can use their talents. I know how to do that, and I can run that hospital. And I kind of prove that. When I retired from the Army, I spent 23 years as a combat arms officer. You know, infantry and armor officer. When I left the Army, I ran a food bank. You don't get any different than that. That's 180 degrees difference. When I took over that food bank, we were handing out 1.2 million pounds of food a year. When I handed it off to the next person 2 years later, we were handing out 3.8 million pounds of food. We doubled the size of the truck fleet, and we almost doubled the size of the workforce. It's about people and trust, period. If you understand that, you can lead any organization.
Well, We're going to have all your social media handles and links that we talked about in our show notes, but is there a website where the alphas can go to learn more about your work, Oak?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's ltcoakmcculloch.com. And on there, it's got my email, my phone number. It's got all my social media links. So, LinkedIn, which is what I do most of my social media stuff on. LinkedIn, Instagram, all of them. It's all on there. So YouTube, so you can go look at videos that or other podcasts or whatever. But yeah, anybody who wants to get in contact with me and have a conversation, I try never to turn down a chance to have a conversation with somebody on a Zoom meeting or a phone call. If I can fit it in my schedule, I'd make it happen, because that's what it's all about, helping other people.
Well, you heard it right here, alphas. Oak is ready to hear from you, so reach out to him right now. Until then, stick around because we've got some scuttlebutt for you right after the break.
The American Legion is raising awareness about PTSD and veteran suicide by offering hope, camaraderie, and support.
Be the one to help end veteran suicide.
Be the one to save one veteran.
Be the one to ask a veteran in your life how they're doing.
Be the one to reach out when a veteran is struggling.
Go to betheone.org and help the American Legion end veteran suicide.
Will you be the one?
Okay, alphas, we hope you had a great break. Now it's time for some scuttlebutt. Booty butt.
Ooh,
Booty
switching it up.
butt.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I
sorry.
think I like the
Yeah,
surgery.
we'll fix it in post.
Yeah, we'll go back to the old one. Yeah, so I had a good break. Hope you did too. I got a good one for you. A Chinese comedy troupe has been slapped with a $2.1 million penalty over a joke about the military that invoked a slogan from General Xi Jinping. The quip, which likened the behavior of the comedian's dog to the military conduct, irked authorities who said the comic Li Haoshi had, quote, humiliated the People's Army. Is that possible, Joe? Do you think?
You know what? I think that's kind of number one, the point of comedy. Two, that's like jump change.
Does anybody know
comedy troops are
satire?
just rolling in dough. 2.1 million. Why don't they just pay it and move on?
I don't know if I don't think a lot of comedians.
I'm exaggerating. That's
Comedians are basically starving artists like the rest.
Yeah.
So the troupe accepted the penalty and terminated Mr. Lee's contract. The offending remark was made during a stand-up performance in Beijing when Mr. Lee alluded to two canines he had adopted, which were chasing a squirrel. Quote, other dogs you see would make you think they are adorable. These two dogs only reminded me of, quote, fight to win, forge exemplary conduct, end quote, said Mr. Lee, whose stage name is House. Hold on a sec. Hold on. The punchline is part of a slogan that President Xi unveiled during the 2013 as a goal for the Chinese military. Now, let me go back. A stage name for a comedian, House? What kind of stage name is that for a comedian?
Maybe he's homely.
Oh man, that took me a beat to get, and that's usually means the joke is not great, Joe.
I didn't claim to make good jokes. I just make constant jokes until they land.
Oh gosh. Can you imagine if the US government fined people for military jokes? Okay, with the number of jokes I've made on behalf of the Air Force, I would be in debtor's prison. And so in honor of free speech, I'd like to share just a few bang up Air Force jokes. Joe, are you ready?
I am ready. I haven't even read these because I want you to blow my mind here.
Okay, what's the fastest way to make E4?
How's that?
Send an E5 to Korea.
I think that works in the Army.
I think that goes across all branches.
Yeah, Marines and everybody.
And I get a soju for a dollar. Okay, all branches of U.S. military use stars for something important. They all have significance, right, Joe? The Army and the Marines sleep under the stars. The Navy navigates using the stars. Well, the Air Force chooses hotels depending on the number of stars.
Hey, that's not bad. I do that now too. Maybe I went to the wrong branch.
Bougie. That's what's a flight of airmen and BNT rush out in formation to do their morning run. Just kidding, it's raining.
That's not bad at all. I like that. I like that.
Alphas, do you have any good jokes about your branches of service? Be sure to share them. Joe, you got any good Navy jokes?
None that are even remotely appropriate. Yeah, they're bad. They're bad.
Well,
At the expense of the Marines, of course. But the only Air Force joke I ever knew was something, I don't even remember the whole joke, but it was something about how do you know an Air Force officer has been promoted, because they won't let you call him Steve anymore. You have to call him Steven or something. There's some way to where, you know, they're already on first name, but getting promoted means it's first name formal. You get the gist of the joke. I'm sure somebody could actually tell the joke and make it funny, but it's not me. I only tell lots of bad jokes.
We're just corporate. We're military adjacent. Yeah. What do you got for Scuttlebutt?
All right. So in February 2022, Patty Pugh's 60-year-old brother, Alvin Jerome Pugh, seemingly vanished. He lived in New York City, far from his siblings in Pueblo, Colorado, but he also always responded to texts and calls. So suddenly he went silent. At first, Patty, her sister, and their 3 brothers thought Alvin had lost his phone, but as his absence dragged on, they grew more worried. Patty and her sister, Teresa, started contacting dozens of hospitals in New York City, including a VA medical center, because Alvin was an Air Force veteran. They couldn't file a missing persons report with the NYPD because they didn't have Alvin's latest address. That's crazy pants. So I guess homeless people just can't ever be missing?
Right.
I don't understand that. I mean, if you had a super, like, if your name was John Anderson or something like that, and they needed an address to verify like who you were, but if you have a fairly unique name and a birth date and a description, and this person is missing, you can't tell me. That's crazy.
Well, think about it though. New York City's huge. I mean, you're not talking about some small town population, 1,200 people.
Yeah.
New York City is vast. So,
but the family searched a database that lists missing and unidentified people. Nothing, no luck for 2 years. But March of this year, Patty Googled Alvin Pugh and New York City, and findagrave.com popped up. Calverton National Cemetery, section 51A, site 2098. The Department of Veterans Affairs had buried her brother in 2023, and although Teresa was listed as a contact on Alvin's VA paperwork, and 3 Pugh siblings still reside in the house where Alvin lived when he enlisted and was discharged from the military, no one notified this man's family, this veteran's family. So Alvin Pugh mistakenly, go ahead. Yeah.
Now, see, that's going the other way. Seems a little more confusing to me, because most veterans have like a next of kin listed in the system. Because, you know, every time I go into the VA, you know, I check in, I'm prompted, hey, is this your next of kin? Is this their updated information? Is this, you know, like every single time I go into an appointment. So, you know, my next of kin may not have my updated information, but the VA certainly does have my next of kin. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So
I'm curious myself what the informational choke point was. Was it the person who's supposed to call? Because I imagine that is a tough job. But I, you know, that's something that I would personally feel like, if you were the person that had to call and say, hey, we found a deceased. I mean, I could see why I wouldn't want to make that call, but there should be some redundancy there to make sure it gets done, even if you don't want to do it. Now, I don't know that that's where the drop in communication was, but I mean, there's somebody at some point has to know what happened with this, because if it can happen to this person, it can happen again and again and again, because apparently Alvin Pugh mistakenly became one of the 2,300 unclaimed veterans. So how many of those have next of kin that have not been notified? So buried by the VA's National Cemetery Administration across the country last year. By law, VA is required to ensure that deceased veterans without a next of kin receive dignified burials with a casket or urn. So for decades, bureaucracy and a lack of coordination among VA and local agencies has allowed tens of thousands of veterans who die alone to pile up in funeral homes and morgues around the country, as their cremated remains linger in storage facilities, stacked on shelves like forgotten paint cans, some collecting dust for more than 100 years. Outrage over the discovery of 28 veterans who had spent 44 years in a mortuary in Oregon spurred an Office of Inspector General investigation and promised reforms by the VA in 2021. A year later, the search for Alvin Pugh's next of kin began. So it took years, however, to piece together what happened. His death certificate cites the pulmonary embolism as his cause of death in February the 2nd of 2022 in his apartment, where a roommate called 911. I'm assuming with his name of a roommate. New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner investigator noticed VA pill bottles in Alvin's apartment, which later led to the confirmation that he qualified for burial in a national cemetery. So, I mean, I'm sure that that this explains more about how this drop in communication happened, but this seems like multiple points of failure. It seems like at multiple times, this can't come down to one person getting in trouble. Unfortunately, one person probably did get yelled at, but really this is, I mean, from the initial call, his name should have been on there from the roommate. I can't imagine a 911 call where they don't even care to identify what's like, who's calling and who the victim or the patient is. But the medical examiner's office searched for next of kin, included calling Alvin's phone to see if anyone would pick up. No one answered. They searched New York City's public records and turned up a caseworker who worked with Alvin, but she didn't return the office's calls. Ultimately, Alvin was labeled unclaimed and the VA took custody of his remains. On February 21, 2023, a year after his death, Alvin Pugh was given a dignified burial at Calverton National Cemetery in New York, according to VA spokesman Terrence Hayes. Halfway across the country, his family remained oblivious for another year. Patty wants her brother's remains exhumed and reburied at Pikes Peak National Cemetery north of Pueblo. In April, VA emailed Patty forms to begin the disinterment. In May, after weeks of inquiries from the Warhorse, VA informed the Pugh family it would cover all the costs to bring Alvin's body back to Colorado. Yeah. All right. So Patty welcomed the news, but she still couldn't believe what it took to find Alvin. She was quoted as saying, "I would put my life on it," she says, that there are other people this has happened to. And that was exactly my point, as I started talking out of my rear end halfway through.
Yeah.
Pretty standard Joe stuff.
I am appalled.
Yeah. That's disheartening.
It is. Yeah.
Like that fantastic conversation we had with the, I'm blanking on her name, that ran the committee of the Afghan, So make it easy. I really want the VA to be something that I can encourage other people to get involved with, but it's sad that there are situations like this that still float around. Jamie Cheshire.
Yeah, Jamie Cheshire.
Thank you, Holly. I definitely want to give her credit because that was a fantastic interview. If you have not heard that interview, she was so great. She was so great and so transparent. That was a fantastic interview. We're going to put a link to that in the show notes for you to go back and check out. That was a good interview. I got a little emotional about that one. I don't even know if it was recorded, but it was a great interview. But I want the VA, I love what the VA can do. The VA has been very supportive for me. I've had a good time, working through prosthetics at the Atlanta VA for the most part. Fantastic guy up there named Mark that really helped improve my quality of life. I really want to make it where I can promote the VA, but this stuff is a massive drop. There should have been somebody somewhere that caught this. This was, I feel like 20 minutes online and I could have figured out who this guy was. So, but apparently the Legion has a resolution supporting the Missing in America project. And that's really cool because there are lots of veterans out there that are sort of floating in limbo of misinformation and no information.
Right.
But this organization actually finds families for unclaimed veterans, and that's incredible. That's what we're hoping for. I think if the VA won't do it, the Legion will step up, because
Yeah.
Legion will do that. But we have links for everything in the show notes as well.
Well, Alphas too, if you're listening and you kind of lost track of a fellow veteran who, maybe for one reason or another kind of went off the grid, maybe it's time to seek them out again and help, track them down, and at least kind of figure out where they're at, and see if we can't track our folks, buddy check. Maybe it's time. And just at least, ping them every once in a while and make sure that we can keep track of them. And because, there are family members who are trying to respect, they're isolating for a reason. Maybe their family members are trying to respect that. But, we as their battle buddies, and, wingmen, we
women
need to make sure that we're doing buddy checks. So.
And don't be discouraged when people don't answer back. It feels good to get the message, even if you're not in a place to respond. You don't always have, because I think the worst part about not doing well is that you have to tell everyone that you're fine when you're not. And just to give time to yourself that you need to sort of process. So don't be discouraged when you reach out to someone 2 or 3 times and they don't write back. That hug of checking in means more than you know. There's texts have saved lives, and you can believe that or not. Don't get me wrong, a phone call and a hug is always better. A stop by and visit is great, but you don't always have access to that. I can't, if I feel like Stacy's having a bad day, I can't just pop over and give her a jumping high five. But I can't really jump, for one, and number 2, she hates high fives.
Yeah, I heard that about you, Joe. You're not
no jumping.
You're too muscle bound, so you're kind of let it down.
Yes, that is correct.
So we have Bravo Zulu before we wrap up today. And it goes to the Merton V Hare American Legion Post 325 in early Iowa versus late Iowa, or quasi early.
You're not going to get up early enough to watch this.
Early Iowa. The Post recently donated funds to purchase 2 ballistic shields for the Sac County Sheriff's Department. The cost of the shields was nearly $7,000. Thank you so much, you guys. Sac County Sheriff's Department Deputy Jeff Traylor attended the Post monthly meeting on July 21st. Not July 21st, July 1st. I made that up. To show the shields to members.
Fake news.
Just fake news. The ballistic shields also include a powerful light and glass breakers. Deputy Traylor noted the certified officers received training and this type of shield during their time at the Law Enforcement Academy. Wow, I'm stumbling today, you guys. Sorry, Alphas. In a separate show of community support, the Post also paid all past due lunch balances for students at Ridgeview Middle School in early. Oh my gosh. You know how many kids go hungry? This is such a big deal. What incredible stuff. The contribution helps fill the gap of families struggling to meet the expenses and reflects the Post's interest in youth success. Well done, Post 325.
Absolutely. I mean, anybody who's seen me, I don't miss meals, and I don't let anybody around me miss meals. So, that's something that I would encourage any Legion Post to do, is to check out and see, some families out there struggling, and there's not a choice. You have to go to public school. It's good to learn, obviously, but there are expenses, and some people are not in a position. I mean, think how hard it is for people. Like, I feel like I've done fairly well the past couple of years, but I have definitely felt the pinch of economics and the way things have gotten tougher and tougher. Grocery bills are crazy.
If you'd stop buying all those action figurines and Pokemon, and
I limit myself to 3 a week. Thank you very much. I'm doing better. It used to be 4.
You have an addiction, Joe.
I do. I can't help it. All right, Alphas, thanks for listening. You can subscribe to our podcast, our newsletter, or send us mail and guest recommendations at legion.org/tangoalphalima.com. We'll see you next week. 100 tampons.